Welcome to Good for Bitcoin, a weekly show recorded live every Friday where we recap the top events of the week and talk about everything that is good for Bitcoin. If it's built on Bitcoin, then it's good for Bitcoin. Let's get started.
Content shared on this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute financial, investment, or legal advice. The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guests and do not reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, or company. We encourage you to conduct your own research and consult with a qualified professional before making any financial decisions.
Hello, Bitcoiners. And if you don't understand that reference, you will soon. This is Good for Bitcoin. It's a weekly show we do every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern, where we recap the events of the week, talk about everything that's good for Bitcoin. If it's built on Bitcoin, then it's good for Bitcoin. I'm Brandon, social media manager here at Trust Machines, also joined by Longstreet on the leather handle. Longstreet, happy Friday, sir.
Happy Friday, Brandon. Always good to hear your voice and get this space started. It's always a highlight and end to my week.
Yeah, I mean, coming off of last week, Nashville, there was so much news that was happening. So, we really wanted to dedicate this space to maybe some things that folks might have missed last week, just because there's so much news that dropped. And this week also just kind of felt like a bit of a slower news week. I feel like just because everyone wanted to announce their stuff last week, to coincide with the conference, which totally makes sense. So, yeah, we have a lot to cover.
It's so true, but at the same time, because there was so much that was announced last week, like we need the time to digest and for the dust to settle, right? Because it's kind of like so much did happen that, there were so many like claims to be made, and you just kind of need to see like, okay, what feels right, what it was hyperbole, what was ridiculous, So I think it's nice. I'm looking forward to the conversation with you here because we've had a week to reflect on things.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. It's nice to sort of, now that we're a little bit 1 week removed, from a lot of the events that happened. What kind of has stuck around, what news has stuck exactly to your point. So before we get into that, maybe we can kind of recap some of the stuff that we did this week. We hosted 2 leather lounges this week. We had a special sort of Nashville recap with some of our friends that were there with us last week. But maybe you can introduce that first, and then we can talk about your space yesterday with BitArch after that.
Yeah. So at the beginning of the week, we had been planning to have BitArch on for a few weeks, and so that was scheduled now. We do every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern. So I didn't want to move that, but I realized like we needed to have a lounge dedicated to the reflection. Because so many guests former guests from the lounge had been there in person. So I wanted to check in with people in the community and see what it was like on the ground. And like you just mentioned, just hear from people that were there and what their thoughts are now that we've been able to reflect on things a little bit more. And it was an awesome space, man. Such good energy. And I asked like a lot of people to come on, and I think like 12 people said, basically everyone said, yes, I'd love to, including some new people too. So I thought, oh, all right, already oversubscribed again. So how are we going to get through all these people in like 60 minutes, But it was wonderful. We had Peter from Velar, Jacob Brown was there, Jake Blockchain, Stuart, Bit by Bit, people from the Welsh community, XY0 came, Jack was there. Chris Perceptions came to talk about, really to give his perspective on the Bitcoin Builders Conference. And then we also, what was amazing is that we had Boozy, Teflon Musk, and Violetta there, 3 artists. So we also got to hear it from their perspective as well. So we had like every kind of take covered, right? We had people that could talk about the ordinal side, what the art was like. Boozy had great observations on that because he was at the previous concert as the previous conference, and he was able to like really understand and explain to us what it was like, what the differences were, because so much has changed in the art world with Bitcoin. It had a much more like art was respected, it was displayed differently, so it really just made for a different vibe shift, as I'm sure you can attest to as well. And then Violetta was there, which is, she's so, I think you said enigmatic. And she lives in Nashville now. So that's her new home. She's been around the ecosystem for a super long time. So she was there. We got to hear some of her music and her takes on the space. Yeah, so we added that extra space on Wednesday, which was super fun. And then on Thursday, we had our Leather Lounge with BitArch, and that was with Bhargav Karcharla, and he's the CEO of BitArch. He's been building in Web 2 and now Web 3. And it was a really fascinating conversation for me because I got to ask so many questions. I'm like so curious all the time, just always learning. So he just answered. He had really thoughtful answers to all my questions. And just real quick, BitArch is it's an omni-chain bridge aggregator. So it allows multiple bridges, L1s and L2s, to connect to each other. Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, stacks. So you can do transfers at BRC20s and just merge between Bitcoin L2s, runes, Taproot, and all that. So anyone who's doing that is going to be innovative in the space. So I had so many good questions for him. One of the highlights for me, he, in a lot of these spaces, I go back with a lot of the stacks people far, so we all know each other. But I asked him like who he follows right now, who he looks to as like innovators in the space, and who he's inspired by. And he said Casey Rodarmore and Munib Ali. I thought, I'm with you on that one. So he had a lot of great answers for me. So, all right, that's that's a good recap of this week. We had 2 leather lounges, and they were both fantastic.
Yeah, the yesterday's space with BitArch, really cool. The I guess more technical leaning spaces don't always get like a huge audience compared to like the community ones, but you do learn so much, and we'll make sure to be posting the recaps of those conversations on our YouTube. So for anybody that missed it, you can go there and check it out. But yeah, really cool to have that special space on Wednesday with some folks, especially some folks that are very active in our ecosystem that we haven't yet had on the lounge. I think Jacob and Violetta both have not been on Leather Lounge yet, so really great to hear from them. And Violetta especially, I feel like a lot of the events that I was at, Violetta was also at performing. She was at Inscribing Nashville. She had a couple panels there. She was performing at Bit Gala. I believe she actually performed at the main conference as well. So she was all over the place in Nashville, and deservedly so. Violetta's really, really amazing. So yeah, really cool to hear from them. Jake as well. When we were recording the Leather Lounge, the live Leather Lounge last week at Bitcoin Builders, actually Jake was one of the people that I was like, oh, I see him in the room, but I don't know if he's available, so I don't want to call him out. But he had like a meeting that he had to go into, so unfortunately he couldn't join us live. But really cool that we were able to get him on Wednesday.
I know, and we weren't able to do last week's Good for Bitcoin because we kind of merged shows. So how great was that to sit in the room, meet all these people in person?
Yeah, really, really cool to see people. I see, some folks in the audience here. Mr. Wagme, shout out. We got to meet in person. That was really cool to, again, put another PFP to, a real face. He's not on the space listening, but I got to meet Akva, who's another Stacks OG at Inscribing Nashville. And that was really cool. So yeah, so many, obviously more than just those two, so many people that I got to meet in person, which was just really amazing to have that human connection. But yeah, let's get into it. We have a lot of news to cover. I think a couple things that I wanted to share first is obviously the elephant in the room with the Bitcoin conference was we had Trump and RFK both speaking. We had essentially 2 out of the 3 main primary presidential candidates speaking in favor of Bitcoin. And I prepared a couple sort of supercuts of the main sort of promises that both Trump and RFK made. So I wanted to play those live on the show just so we have a little bit better of an understanding of kind of where these 2 candidates are coming from. I'm going to start with RFK because he was first on Friday, and then Trump was on Saturday. So we'll just take 2 minutes and listen to some very high level overview of what RFK had to say about Bitcoin.
Hello, Bitcoiners. I am so glad to be back for my second Bitcoin conference. Since last year in Miami, I've been meeting with leaders and thinkers from this community. After all I've learned, I intend, as President of the United States, to sign an executive order on day one, directing the Department of Justice and the U.S. Marshals to transfer the approximately 200,000 Bitcoin held by the U.S. government to the United States Treasury, where it will be held as a strategic asset. I will sign another executive order directing the U.S. Treasury to purchase 550 Bitcoin daily until the U.S. has built a reserve of at least 4 million Bitcoins. Our nation holds approximately 19% of global gold reserves. This policy will give us about the same proportion of total Bitcoin. And these actions will eventually move Bitcoin to a valuation of hundreds of trillions of dollars. I will sign also an executive order directing the IRS to issue public guidelines that all transactions between Bitcoin and the US dollar are unreportable transactions and, by extension, non taxable. I will also sign an executive order directing the IRS to treat Bitcoin as an eligible asset for 1031 exchange into real property. Last year at this conference, I proposed that as your president, I would fight to ensure the right to self-custody Bitcoin, to run nodes in our own homes, to stop the federal government from usurping First Amendment rights to open source, privacy enhancing technologies. I pledge to prevent government officials from adopting CBDCs, which would inevitably morph into what we saw in Canada. Most importantly, I promise to secure the United States position as the global hub of cryptocurrency innovation and entrepreneurship and investment and technology. President Trump has had 4 years to pardon Ross Ulbricht and Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, and he didn't do it. I plan on pardoning them all on day one. Thank you all very much, and God bless you.
All right, so that's a super cut there of all sort of the promises that RFK made, and some of them, were things that he made last year in Miami at the Bitcoin conference because he was there. And what do you think about RFK's, I guess, speech? It was about 45 minutes long, but we cut it down to 2 minutes.
Yeah. It's well, that was you really got some of the highlights right there. My overall take, and I know we're going to compare the two, but like RFK knows what he's talking about. His speech was more technically accurate, and there was more nuance there too. You know what I found was like new this time around was the concept of the 1031 exchange for Bitcoin, which I guess makes sense because it's, we view it as digital property. So I thought when I heard that, I thought like that's a smart move. That makes a lot of sense. I would vote for that.
Yeah, I think to really boil it down. Well, before I get there, a couple things. RFK, he was at the Bitcoin conference last year, speaking about Bitcoin. Some of these promises he made last year when he announced his candidacy, and he's on he's been on a Bitcoin journey for a while now, to your point, right? He understands Bitcoin. And I didn't include it in the supercut because it wasn't necessarily like a promise, and I just wanted to keep it to like very high level. But in his speech, he talked about Trump. He addressed Trump specifically, and what Trump was sort of planning on doing, or rumored to be doing at his speech, which was scheduled to be the following day. And he gave Trump some credit, right, for getting involved with Bitcoin, but he also warned the audience a bit as well, right, for what are Trump's motives for embracing Bitcoin as much as he has? Is it because he really understands the technology and really understands just the culture and the ethos behind Bitcoin, or is he just pandering like to the audience, right? That was essentially his question, which I think is a very valid question, and we'll get into that when we listen to Trump's speech as well.
Yeah, I think that is really great for everyone to be aware of, and we have 4 years of a Trump presidency and the policy to compare to his new promises. And what's tough for Bitcoiners is, as we have more people in our lives that go down the Bitcoin path, it's such a process. You slowly get it at first, you do more education, and the more you learn, the more you, whatever, DCA, the more comfortable you are with a higher allocation. So we have to like balance this need for don't trust, verify on any politician making promises with the knowledge that a Bitcoin journey does take time. So if we're going to give Trump or anyone the benefit of the doubt, it is okay. They are newly educated and they have changed their opinions because now they know more about it. And is that the case, or are they just making empty promises just to get more votes?
Yeah, I mean, to very much give Trump the benefit of the doubt, right? I think we were probably everybody on this space was in a very similar thing when they first discovered Bitcoin. It's sort of like, you come in for the money and then you stay for the sound money, right? And I think Trump is sort of in step one of that, probably.
Yeah.
Still, but I know we want to start comparing. So maybe we'll listen to some of what Trump had to say, and then we can kind of talk a little bit more about both of their stances. So let's hear from Trump.
Hello, Bitcoiners. Thank you very much. Hello, it's good to be with you. This afternoon, I'm laying out my plan to ensure that the United States will be the crypto capital of the planet and the Bitcoin superpower of the world. If crypto is going to define the future, I want to be mined, minted, and made in the USA. The moment I'm sworn in, the persecution stops and the weaponization ends against your industry. On day one, I will fire Gary Gensler and appoint a new SEC chairman. I didn't know he was that unpopular. Let me say it again. On day one, I will fire Gary Gensler. Whoa. As president, I will immediately shut down Operation Choke Point 2.0. Upon taking office, I will immediately appoint a Bitcoin and Crypto Presidential Advisory Council. Their task will be to design transparent regulatory guidance for the benefit of the entire industry, and they will get it done in 100 days. There will never be a CBDC while I'm president of the United States. And I will always defend the right to self-custody. We will create a framework to enable the safe, responsible expansion of stable coins. I have set the ambitious goal that by the end of my term, the United States will be the #1 lowest cost of energy and electricity of any nation on earth. The federal government has almost 210,000 Bitcoin, or 1% of the total supply that will ever exist. But for too long, our government has violated the cardinal rule that every Bitcoiner knows by heart: never sell your Bitcoin. And so, as the final part of my plan today, I am announcing that if I am elected, it will be the policy of my administration, United States of America, to keep 100% of all the Bitcoin the U.S. government currently holds or acquires into the future. This will serve in effect as the core of the strategic national Bitcoin stockpile. And so as I take steps to transform that vast wealth into a permanent national asset to benefit all Americans, today I repeat my pledge to commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht to a sentence of time served. Thank you all. Have a good time with your Bitcoin and your crypto and everything else that you're playing with. Thank you.
So there we go.
That last line just gets me so much.
Yeah.
All your Bitcoin, all your crypto, and everything else you're playing with.
We're playing with a lot over here. Yeah. So I think you feel like he was speaking to us.
Yeah, I think he does so many. Okay, so like technically he had some missteps, right? Like he wasn't as on point or technically as accurate as other speakers at the conference or even RFK, but he's got the big ones down. Like he understands, and he's got somebody. He's so good at one-liners, like never sell your Bitcoin, right? Like he knows what to say to get the crowd going.
Yeah, I think so. If I at the surface level, listening to these two speeches, you would think that a lot of their promises are pretty similar, but they're actually pretty different. RFK's speech, RFK essentially wants to turn Bitcoin into essentially another currency, right? He wants to sort of make it, he wants to make it untaxed, so you can spend Bitcoin on goods and services and not be taxed on it, and buy property with it, and do all of those things, and just like you can with the U.S. dollar. Where Trump is really treating it just as more of a commodity and a store of value. Um, and both of them have their benefits, but I think it's a pretty different approach, right, for how you think about Bitcoin. Whether you think about it as RFK is kind of more medium of exchange, and Trump is more store of value, with these two approaches.
That's a really good difference you pointed out. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I think yeah, it's interesting. I think going back to kind of what RFK was talking about, with Trump, kind of, and where he is on his crypto journey. Yeah, it's interesting to hear, some of the things, they both promised kind of some similar things, but yeah, there's definitely some differences in there, and you can definitely hear that RFK is a little bit more sort of ingrained into the culture, right? He also talked about the fact that he won this really big lawsuit last year, and most of the money that he was awarded, as part of that, he put into Bitcoin. So he's in it, right? He is deep into his Bitcoin journey at this point, and Trump owns some Bitcoin through donations, but yeah, it's hard to say like what his actual conviction is, I guess, in Bitcoin itself.
True. Yeah. But to be honest, like, Trump is 78. And if I heard any 78-year-old talking with half the eloquency about Bitcoin and knowledge, like, clearly he spent some time, And I mean, just to zoom out, to have him, a former president and leading candidate at the Bitcoin conference, in the context of a lot of other, Senator Loomis spoke, which I think we'll talk about, RFK and all these other people, man. It's a good year. It's looking, the next 6 months are going to be like so wild, so exciting.
Yeah, we've talked about it a few times on this show, just kind of questioning how much of Trump's campaigning for Bitcoin is authentic versus more just like kind of pandering to the Bitcoin audience, and it kind of brings in the question of like, does it even matter? We're
Right.
hearing, now, right now that this is out there, other world leaders, right, other countries are suddenly waking up and being like, oh, should we have a Bitcoin strategy, right? Like Trump
Right.
was the president, right, of the United States, and he's talking about Bitcoin. So it's opening up that game theory. And yeah, like you said, it's going to be a very interesting kind of 6 to 12 months in Bitcoin, especially if Trump does get elected. That I mean, I'm sure that we would, within that time frame, see more countries getting on board with Bitcoin if that were to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the Overton window is shifting again, and regardless of who gets elected, the fact that Trump is here, he has a strong position. Everyone now has to have an opinion. And I've been keeping an eye on Dennis Porter because I know we've talked about him quite a lot on the show. He's one of these people, boots on the ground in Washington, D.C., doing as much education as possible. And there's a tweet, maybe I'll pin it in the nest in a minute here. But with Senator Lummis's bill, in less than 24 hours, over 1,100 letters have been sent to U.S. senators asking them to co-sponsor the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve bill. And nearly 60% of those letters have been sent to Democrats, which, just to the point of, it's becoming less like niche, just like Bitcoin is Republican or Bitcoin is right. Bitcoin is for everyone. Overton window is changing. Everyone has to have an opinion.
Yeah, I'll be a little honest though. I mean, especially with RFK's speech, the prospect of the U.S. purchasing 550, I believe, was the number, Bitcoin per day, is a little scary. Not because the U.S. will be like in major control of like a lot of Bitcoin or anything. I don't think that, like, that's not the threat. I think the
Yeah.
threat is like hyperinflation, right? If like what happens when the Bitcoin price goes up and the US has some crazy mandate that they still need to continue buying 550 Bitcoin every day? That's terrifying, right? Like that I don't know. That actually scared me.
Like from the perspective of everyone else who is kind of slow to get onboarded, they're going to miss the train.
Well, no, but like how is the US going to purchase this 550
Mm,
Bitcoin? They're going to have to print more money, right?
yeah.
like
Yeah.
so
Well,
that I don't know. That was pretty scary proposition I think to me.
yeah, that is wild. I think some people would say the money is getting printed no matter what. But yeah, that is wild. Can I read this little segment, some of the highlights from the Lummis bill and from her speech?
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to watch her speech yet. So definitely yeah, let's hear it.
I just put a couple sentences together. And it followed Trump's speech. So like it's I feel like it's a really good trifecta, RFK, Trump, and then Senator Lummis, and she identifies herself as the Bitcoin senator. So she came out right after him and she said the goal is to establish a Bitcoin strategic reserve, a network of secure storage vaults, a purchase program, and other programs to ensure transparent management of Bitcoin holdings of the federal government. This Bitcoin reserve that we're going to create will start with the 200,000 Bitcoins that President Trump just mentioned and pool it into a reserve stored in geographically diverse vaults. And that's only the beginning. So after 5 years, the US will assemble 1 million Bitcoins, 5% of the world's supply, and it'll be held for a minimum of 20 years and can be used for one purpose, and that is to reduce the debt. With a strategic Bitcoin reserve, we will have an asset that in that period of time, before 2045, can cut our debt in half. And as Michael Saylor said yesterday, if we put $3.3 million in a Bitcoin reserve, we will eliminate the United States debt. We will be debt free because of Bitcoin. This is the solution. This is the answer. This is our Louisiana purchase moment. Thank you, Bitcoin. So, audience, hands up if you know the Louisiana purchase moment, if you got that reference. I had to look that one up again. It's been a
Yeah,
while
I
since.
mean I'm a little rusty since
Yeah.
high school or whenever I learned about
Yeah.
that.
I looked it up just so I could understand the significance of why she pointed that out. But the Louisiana Purchase was a land deal in 1803 where the U.S. purchased 800,000 square miles of territory from France, which effectively doubled the size of the U.S. So it turned out to be an incredible purchase. So drawing the comparison between the two, I think is a pretty dramatic and effective comparison.
Yeah, I would say like that's sort of marketing for politicians, right? Like
Yeah.
any politician is going to understand that in depth, and yeah, it makes sense. And yeah, I agree. It's a good comparison for sure.
Yeah. And I don't know what percentage of Senate bills pass. It might not, but once again, it's moving the needle.
Sure.
And educating.
Yeah. Speaking of sort of the stockpile, so I'm looking on Arkham Intelligence right now. They have a sort of a dashboard for U.S. government holdings, and there was a lot of FUD over the past couple days about the U.S. Like, oh, now the U.S. heard that what Trump is planning on doing, and now they're like trying to sell all their Bitcoin, and that doesn't seem to be the case. I think that was just some FUD. If you like, all the wallet addresses are pretty public. You can kind of see, where they are, and there was some moving around of funds, but I don't think it's been proven yet that there was anything actually sold. So
Right.
yeah, TBD on that, but it doesn't seem like yeah, there was any selling going on, even though there has been a pretty big I guess dip in Bitcoin this week.
Yep. Been a big pullback. Who knows why? It's probably just coincidence. I think NLW said it best that I think it's the Occam's razor principle that the simplest explanation is probably the correct one. And that is that all of these Bitcoins were probably like, it was just part of the plan. Like, regardless of last week's Nashville events and narrative philosophies changing about U.S. Bitcoin strategic reserve. It's probably just been in the works for a while, and it was time to do it.
Yeah, and just like macro as well this week, right? The US stock market has just been annihilated this week. So I think it's probably just more related to that. Bitcoin tends to move similar to a lot of these other stocks, indexes out there. So it makes sense.
Yep, still trades like a risk asset.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I think we should move on to some of the other announcements because there was some pretty big ones that happened last week. We did actually talk about this a little bit last Thursday on the Leather Lounge, live Leather Lounge. But Lightning Labs had announced the mainnet release of Taproot assets, which is huge. So I remember that they had announced this, I believe, the previous year at Bitcoin Miami, and it was something that they were still sort of building and iterating on. So the fact that they kind of now have it in a more live fashion is very exciting. For those that don't know, Taproot assets are essentially trying to bring non-Bitcoin assets onto the Lightning Network, like stablecoins, for example, right? Imagine being able to move stablecoins around on the Lightning Network and have them eventually kind of settle back to Bitcoin once things are all said and done. That would be really great, right? To be able to transact stablecoins on Lightning. So, there's a few kind of things that are in the works in terms of, we obviously have runes also on the L1 that, and there's some stablecoin projects that are kind of being built there as well. But Lightning, when it works pretty good in terms of its speed. So, a really cool development.
Yeah, that's just the innovation happening on L2s and Lightning. It's inevitable and necessary for Bitcoin to scale. So yeah, that's an exciting announcement.
Yeah, I mean, we should mention as well, though, it is now August, which, based on timelines that were shared, we may be seeing Nakamoto at the end of this month. We may be less than 30 days away from Nakamoto, and that would be incredibly exciting, because then we will essentially be seeing Lightning speeds for not just Stacks, but all of the assets on Stacks as well. And some of those are stable coins, and some of those are obviously all the meme coins are friends in Welsh and nothing, and all the other coins that are out there. So that's going to be just a huge unlock for the Stacks ecosystem.
There's going to be just a deluge of projects and things that have been being built over the past, whoever knows how long, year, 2 years. A lot of projects were planning on going live in June or May, whenever we were first expecting Nakamoto to go live. So yeah, there's a lot pent up. So the floodgates are going to open, and it's going to be a good time.
Yeah, similar to what happened last week at the Bitcoin conference with all these announcements, going out. I think to your point, yeah, we're going to see a lot of Stacks-based announcements once we get Nakamoto live.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah. Let's see. In some other news, we had this one was kind of cool. BitLayer, so it's a Bitcoin Layer 2 infrastructure project, has successfully raised $11 million in a Series A funding round that was led by Franklin Templeton. And this is notable just because it's the first investment from Franklin Templeton into a Bitcoin Layer 2 project. So pretty cool. The institutions are coming, right? That's been kind of said for a while. And welcome Franklin Templeton to the Bitcoin Layer 2 space.
Crazy. Franklin Templeton. I mean, that's such a name that I've grown up hearing like on normal TV commercials. So that's another sign of mainstream adoption. When you hear these huge platforms, asset managers talking about not only Bitcoin, but then so another thing that we talked about on like Wednesday's space, you got the big main like Bitcoin conference where it's mostly about like the monetary asset of Bitcoin. And then you have like Bitcoin Builders, which is really focusing on the blockchain, innovation happening on the blockchain. So now we're starting to see this rippling effect where the big players are doing more than just talking about Bitcoin. the token, the asset. Now we're talking about the blockchain and the innovation happening on it.
Yeah, and there's, compared to last year, right? We've been posting some recaps of some of our thoughts. I think it was Rena that was on a talk recently. One of the videos that we posted, our COO Rena, and she was, in her talk, she was like, last year, there was like 4 or 5 Bitcoin layers that really kind of were out there and sort of mattered in the ecosystem, and now there's over 85, and counting, right? There's probably over 100 now since her speech a few weeks ago. So yeah, just the amount of development and innovation that's happening in this space is pretty remarkable. And I have to imagine that there's going to be some sort of consolidation in the future, right? I don't think we can have 85 successful Bitcoin L2s out there. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think they're all going to be successful, but it'll just be really interesting to see which ones, kind of last and which ones don't.
Okay, so I posed that same question to yesterday's guest, Bargov, because I kind of had that same intuition that we're going to see this kind of settlement. A lot of protocols are going to die out, and we're going to see like the strongest ones survive. But he had an interesting take that we don't need less L1s and less L2s. He thinks that we're going to get more and more and more, and there's always going to be growing use cases. So he had a lot of unexpected answers that weren't intuitive to me. So I really valued that take.
Yeah, that is interesting. I remember him saying that. I don't know if I agree necessarily.
Yeah.
I think that for special use cases like that, that's where we're going to see like layer 3s take hold on layer 2s, right? Thinking of things like stacks, right? The stacks, is it the microblocks, right? That got sort of launched last year. I'm not sure if anybody is really making a huge use case out of those yet. Maybe Hero Gamer is in the audience, and Hero Gamer might know a little bit better than I do about that. But that's where I think a lot of the kind of more special use case stuff is going to happen on sort of these layer 3 networks that are on top of the layer 2s.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's the best hybrid because it's just messy, and then we're having to figure out all of these bridge aggregators, interoperability. How do you make it trustless, trust minimized? We already have a great blockchain. It's called Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but 85, or 100 plus different L2s fighting over L1 block space is going to really make Bitcoin L1 very expensive to transact on. And maybe that is a good thing, right? Over time, in the far future, it probably is a good thing. But for now, I don't think we want that yet.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
The more L2 are competing over L1 space, it demands their existence.
Yeah.
Nice. What else? Some news from Fold this week?
Yeah, so I think this happened last week, but we want to send some congratulations to Fold. They've been around in the space for quite some time. They have a Bitcoin debit card that they offer with some sort of gamification things. But they announced last week that they were planning to go public through a merger. They're doing like a reverse SPAC kind of merger. And they're aiming to be the first Bitcoin-powered financial services company listed on NASDAQ. And I would argue that maybe Coinbase could be considered that, or even like Square. But regardless, congratulations to Fold. They are a very they've been in the Bitcoin space building for years now, and really cool to see another Bitcoin company go public.
Yep, more good news. I remember for a while I was opening up my Fold app, and I think it was like once a day, doing that spin to get, I don't know how many sats it was.
That's right.
That gamification element, that can be powerful.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I prefer credit cards. I think over debit cards when it comes to like crypto. The Coinbase, offering, right? They have like a debit card, and I guess you can spend like USDC but I don't know. I just prefer like the ability to sort of like pay it off at a later time, just personally, I guess. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's still really great, for the ecosystem to have more Bitcoin companies getting on board and getting on the public markets.
for sure. Yeah, it's only going to help adoption.
Yeah, and I think one other story this happened, I think just maybe today or yesterday, that came out was, and we've talked about when this was going to start happening with the Bitcoin ETFs.
Mm.
Morgan Stanley has decided to allow its financial advisors to offer Bitcoin ETFs to its wealthy clients starting on August 7th, which is next week. So this move is in response to client demand, makes Morgan Stanley the first major Wall Street bank to permit its advisors to pitch Bitcoin ETFs. And we talked about this, with the ETFs. We heard, I believe, from there was a space that we did, I think, where both Rena and Shaylee were both on, and
Mhm.
we were talking about this a little bit more. And yeah, there's sort of stages, that these products go through when they get launched, when these ETF products get launched. And on day one, uh, they were always talking about, oh, now that BlackRock is selling them, now they're going to have all of the BlackRock salespeople all out there selling Bitcoin, ETFs to everybody. And just in a TradFi world, it just doesn't happen that quickly. It takes some time.
Right.
So we're now seeing, that this is going to be the first example of that, right? And obviously, Morgan Stanley is a big company, not quite as big as BlackRock in terms of assets under management, but
Yeah.
still a uh, pretty big development that we're now going to start to see more of these ETFs being actively sold to clients versus what was happening before. Clients had to specifically ask for it.
Yeah, that was just something I had to like wrap my head around at first, because my assumption was, oh, ETF is here, everyone's going to buy, but really, like, right now we're not seeing the level of retail buying, for example, that we did in previous cycles. And so with the ETF being unlocked, at first it was still just a reflection of the percentage of retail that now wanted to put it in their accounts. But now, as education is spreading, people are understanding it more. Another thing why the second half of 2024 is going to be so exciting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, looking at kind of what they're so to expand a little bit more on that, they're basically the advisors will now be able to offer BlackRock's iShares Bitcoin Trust and Fidelity's Bitcoin Fund, so IBIT and FBTC, and it's only going to be to clients with a net worth of at least 1.5 million and a risk tolerance that's suitable for speculative investments. So again, it's not going to be for everybody, right? It's going to be kind of only for those clients, those high net worth clients that are also kind of willing to take risks based on what they've kind of shared with their advisors. So not to
Right.
everybody yet, but we've seen over time more funds, more pension funds, things like that are slowly allocating to to Bitcoin, right? To have like 1% of their fund in Bitcoin or something like that. I don't think we've seen it in the US yet. I think it was in Canada, where we saw Fidelity's one of Fidelity's index funds um, include their Bitcoin fund kind of in that index as part of kind of their risk profile. So we haven't, I think, seen a lot of that yet in the U.S. But again, it's just only sort of a matter of time, and there's just kind of this slow rollout, a slow adoption of these ETFs, and what these funds feel comfortable with, selling to their clients. So yeah, again, we'll see that grow as time goes on.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like that's most of the news that we had. Obviously, there's been a lot more than that, but again, there's so much to cover. I'm still like needing to go back and watch all the videos. If there's anybody that's in the audience that wants to maybe come up, if there's anything that's really specifically stuck out to you, and you want to come up and and talk about it, definitely feel free to request and come up. Um, but yeah.
I think I heard Christopher and some other people talk about Munib's speech at the Bitcoin Builders Conference. And I know one thing he articulates so well is the need for scaling Bitcoin. And a lot of our conversations are, focused on U.S. adoption and action happening within the U.S. But it's also good to consider that this is a really important asset for people around the world who have currencies that are inflating, more than the U.S. dollar. I know Bitcoiners are always talking about how the U.S. dollar is, whatever expletive four-letter word they want to use for it because it's inflationary. But it's actually still, like, compared to other countries' currencies, it's the best one. So yeah, I think that's good. A good thing to consider is that what does it mean for people for like $1,000 worth of Bitcoin is a lot of money,
Yeah, I mean, it definitely. Yeah, it's definitely important to think about it in terms of like relativity relative to other currencies. Yeah, U.S. is certainly the strongest, and yeah, there's all these kind of things that come out even for people in the U.S. Right, that a majority of people in the U.S. have less than $400 in their savings. Right, they can't afford any major emergencies, and how can they be
Yeah.
expected to buy Bitcoin if they can't even afford just basic necessities? So still, definitely a lot of work to do just in terms of growing the economy, making it, easier for people to, acquire. But yeah, I'll be honest. I think so. Munib's talk was happening, I think, during our leather lounge.
Yeah.
So I didn't get a chance to actually see Munib speak during his sort of main keynote. I know we're going to be reviewing some videos, and there's so many videos, honestly, that came from Nashville that we're probably going to be posting those over the next like 2, 3, even like 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So I will get a chance to review all that stuff as soon as I finish editing it all to post it. But yeah, I mean, I have no doubt, that Manib had a lot of really great things to say, like he always does whenever he does his talks. And we heard from a lot of folks, not just Manib as part of Trust Machines. We heard from, I know Gina and Rena did a space on, or not a space, did a talk on BNS, BNS v2. They talked about .locker, so some really cool stuff there, which I heard the crowd really enjoyed that presentation. On the dev stage, we heard from one of our core engineers, Daniel, who's been contributing to SBTC. And he was interviewed by Andre, I believe, on that. So we gotta review that. We heard from Blaze, who is one of the Trust Machines GMs, and he is one of the people that is working on building our upcoming DeFi platform that is kind of still in stealth and doesn't have a name yet, that we've announced. But if you want some alpha, you can hear from Blaze. That's, I think, that one of the first times that he's been sort of publicly speaking and for Trust Machines. And who else? I think that's everybody at the conference, at the Bitcoin Builders Conference. But yeah, a lot of, and other than Trust Machines, obviously, there's a lot of really great speakers that were there that I also want to make sure that I listen to. I think it was actually this morning, the Bitcoin Builders Conference posted all of the videos, so now you can actually go through and you can watch them all if you didn't get a chance to watch them live last week.
Well, that's a good recap right there.
Man, that was just all from the top of my head.
Yeah,
I've just been on it.
Yeah, you are, man. Anything else? Let's see, what else did you mention in the BNS space? Is that, and the .locker, like, any updates on that?
BNS v2 is sort of still a work in progress. It kind of got buried in with all the announcements that were happening last week, but BNS v2 is now out on testnet. So right now, builders and providers and wallet, providers and everybody, it's now kind of their opportunity to test things, try to break things. And yeah, it's, still a work in progress. I think that they're still going through some audits just for security, to kind of tighten everything up there. I'm not sure if it's going to be before Nakamoto. It might be a little bit after. I'm not sure of the timeline, to be honest with you. But things are still moving along at least. And we're preparing a space as well for .locker specifically. And then we did a space a couple weeks ago with BNS V2, and we had that was a really great space. We had so many BNS OGs that were on there, including Jesus and who is actually building the BNS V2 contract along with Pato. So that was a really good space. And I guess TBD on more .locker news, but the team's definitely working hard on a lot of the back end stuff with getting that prepared and ready for launch.
Nice. I always enjoy our conversations, Brandon. You there's a lot in your head just that you're able to come out with right there. So good recap.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to keep track of, just at Trust Machines itself, but also in the ecosystem, right? So glad to have you here to to talk about everything. And especially coming from last week, having you, I'm sad that you weren't there, but it was made it easier to kind of join in and have you kind of host the lounge last week, so we could kind of join in and have everybody on. And always great to talk back and forth on all the news that's happening.
It is, man. I was really sad to have missed Nashville for sure. I know I should have figured out how to make it work. But if there's any bright side, like, yes, I was able to just kind of be available all the time and have a normal schedule and get a bunch of stuff done. So that's the only silver lining I can really think of.
Yeah, well, next year it'll be in Vegas. Seems like the conference just keeps getting closer and closer and closer to me in California. So pretty short flight for me to get there, but that is going to be, I think, a huge conference. Just with where it is in Vegas, right? That's just such a hub for travel.
Yeah,
and that's going to be a big deal.
I know some people are super excited about it. I'm not like super pumped on Vegas, but I'll be there for the Bitcoin conference next year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. Like I'm not a gambler. I don't drink even. So like Vegas is not like really my city normally, but just knowing that it is such an international destination, I think it's going to be a pretty big deal.
True. Could be good for onboarding too.
Yeah.
We're going to say, oh, nudge me, twist my arm. Sure, I'll go to Vegas.
Yeah. Well,
cool. Well, thanks again, Brandon.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We will see you next week. We have Leather Lounge that is happening on every Thursday, and Good for Bitcoin happening every Friday. So we will see y'all next week, and have a good weekend.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. We record Good for Bitcoin live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on X. Please follow us at Trust Machines Co. if you would like to listen and engage with us live. Visit us at trustmachines.co for all the latest Bitcoin news. We'll see you next week.